So let's talk about this feeling of alienation. So this feeling of aloneness, loneliness, the sense that one doesn't belong, doesn't matter, has no particular value, has no role. And you might see that in this image of this woman sitting alone while in the midst many, many people. And so he also describes, just like Ralomé in The Existentialist, the sense of lack of Mitwelt, which is alienation from others, the lack of Eigenwelt, which is alienation from ourselves, and the lack of Umwelt, which is the connection with nature that we need, and we can be alienated from that. And this is the predominant state, he would say, in our modern world. And by the way, he died in 1980. I wonder what he would say about the world of 2024 and 2025, where we are now. So this is the case of the young man who shot up the children, the first graders at the Sandy Hook Elementary School, and I believe it was the year 2013. And this is the home he lived in, and it was similar to a home that we discussed in an earlier class. So it's a very affluent home, very safe, very comfortable, every need met. He lived in this big home alone with his mom, and he had his own bedroom and bathroom. And of course, he was grown. He was 18 or 19, I think, when he did this. And his mom was gone a lot because he was an adult. His parents were divorced and lived in another city, and so he didn't see them. So there he was, and he had, at least, he was thought to have had some degree, to have been on the autism spectrum. So he had a hard time connecting socially, and he had an easy time connecting digitally. So he spent a lot of time on his computer, but he didn't have that foundational, perhaps, feeling of love and belongingness. So what happens when that's not there? Now, there's no circumstance ever that justifies harm to other humans, especially the kind of harm that he did. And this isn't what is being proposed here by showing this. It's more to be an exemplar of the extreme case of what happens in this state of isolation or alienation. So it leads to a loss or a lack of sympathy for others, an estrangement from the world, a feeling that you are not the same, are not one with the world. And so what do? Well, he says we handle it by having fun. We distract ourselves. We watch serial videos. We do different sports. We watch games. We socialize. We distract ourselves from the sense that we have of alienation and aloneness. And that leads to this society of TV, like engaging with screens, self-indulgence, feeling, eating snacks when we feel that least little urge. We indulge in sensory experience, like we stimulate our senses, our eyes, our visual systems a lot. And all of these things, he says, leave people alienated, fearful, and susceptible to totalitarian government, that is, ceding, giving away one's rights, because we are just too alienated from everything. We don't feel like we're one. And we are, we aren't there, but we are at risk of that with too much of this sense of alienation. So what are our needs more specifically, apart from those general needs we described? Fromm says we have 5 needs. And the first of these, they're not in order of importance, but the first of these is relatedness. We need to be separate. We are separate, but we also need within that to be relatedness. And we need this experience of love where we allow ourselves to rise above our separateness, merge with another person, and yet within that we don't deny our own uniqueness. We retain our own individuality. Secondly, he says we all need creativity. We're not passive. We want to be creators. And we don't just mean art. It could be art or music or literature or something like that, but also giving birth is an act of creativity, planting seeds, making pots. Love is a creative act, he would say. And so anything that we're doing that offers outwards, that comes from that heart space and is unique, that's an expression of love and creativity. Rootedness. We need to know where our home is, to feel at home in the universe. We need to know our connection to Mother and Mother Earth, to humanity, to nature, We need to be at home. We need roots. A sense of identity, a sense of who we are as individuals. It can sometimes be defined by the group, which might leave us with no real sense of our individuality, which can then reduce our offerings in this life. And then a frame of orientation. So we need to know how to interpret the things we're seeing in the world around us. And religion or stories or songs, the stories of your people are one way that these are related. In the secular world, often it's more like scientific ideas. But we do need to have a frame of orientation, or we'll feel that sense of being lost. So the heading on this page says freedom is a burden, and we discussed freedom a little bit with Rollo May, and so we'll say that freedom does in fact exist in this modern world. It didn't always exist. In the Middle Ages, as the example here, if you were in the lower classes, everything was predetermined. If you were a serf, you could only be a serf. And your father was, and your parents were, and you would follow that path. And there weren't any choices. That was just the way the structure was set up. And that was easy. You didn't really have to search for what your career was going to be. You didn't have to go through an identity crisis. But that's no longer true today. Now we have all kinds of freedom to make whatever of ourselves we can. And for a lot of people, it's not grounded in culture or in roots to nature. And so it becomes really frightening. You don't want to walk out because you don't have a map. And so it requires a lot of soul searching, a lot of willingness to take responsibility for your choices, good and bad. Time to explore your identity and to have doubt. All of this is hard work. It's unsettling, it's uncertain, and we don't like that feeling. And so he says it's easier to escape from freedom through authoritarianism. How does that work? We let someone else tell us what to do. So, be it government or be it a relationship in which someone else has authority, or a job, and that's great according to people who want to escape their own freedom. The world is frightening, and I can escape this fear if I fit myself into a prescribed life as either the one in power or the one who is controlled. Either way, I reduce uncertainty, and I don't have to be as afraid. Or destructiveness is another way to escape freedom. We can escape through destroying the world around us. We can destroy ourselves, negate the self. Like this can happen through things like addiction, suicide. He considers both of these an escape from the willingness to take responsibility from our choices. Also, just things like putting yourself down or not believing in yourself is another way of destroying the self, because each of us here is put here with a gift. And if we negate ourselves through bad self-talk or lack of confidence, we're destroying ourselves. Or we can destroy and negate the other. That's another way of reducing fear. He talks about vandalism or humiliating other people, terror, extending terror to other people. Either way, he says, destructive. And the last one that he says most people use is what he calls automaton conformity. And that is, we just fit into the way people around us are doing things without making our own decisions. A person with this escape mechanism might say, this lack of structure is frightening, and I can escape if I use other people to decide how to act, what to do, what to think, what to feel, what to believe. So, escape styles can relate to what's happening in our families. And so some families, and number one here, are symbiotic families. They kind of swallow each other up, like you don't feel a sense of your own individuality. Your connection and linkage and duty to your family is so strong. And people who are in families like these, who don't have their sense of their own individuality, would tend to escape into authoritarianism, just finding someone else to give them the rules. He says that people from withdrawing families who are cold, two kinds of withdrawing families. There's the cold kind where they're just punishment-oriented, bound to rules, pushing people to success, but without that love and belongingness, tend to escape into destructivism. And remember, this can be internalizing, destroying the self, or externalizing, causing harm to others around. But it comes from these ice-cold families who just are punishment rule-bound. But then we also have modern families where no one is taking the seat as leader in the family. There's no matriarch. There's no nully that knows what things are, or no elders to guide the way. The parents see themselves as equals, not as parents who should be guiding your way. And so children in these situations feel lost too. They don't have their orientation. So how do they know what to do? Well, they copy their peers in media. And we see an awful lot of this now with cell phones. That's what the anxious generation talked about. And so, parents need to take their seats and set guidelines and know what's best for the children. The escape style, he would say, is automaton conformity, just going along with what the peers are doing. In number 3, we have a healthy family in which parents take responsibility to teach children good reason, good things to learn, good ways of navigating the world in an atmosphere of love. And so children do have their freedom, but the choices they make and the responsibility for those choices are big conversations at the home, as well as the responsibility to society and to nature. And all of these things are taught, but within the framework of love. So the social unconscious, things that we are unaware of with social forces. So there are a few orientations, and one is a receptive orientation. People who just accept to receive, look at that word receive in there, they expect to receive what they need from outside the self, not within the self. So in lower levels of society, sometimes people don't take that responsibility. It hasn't been part of their worldview. And so they tend to get maybe connected in too much with symbiotic families to see that many of the needs are met outside the self. They might wish for better things. They might be accepting and optimistic and submissive, but they're still probably not manifesting all of their potential. And exploitative orientation are those who expect to be able to take what they need, and they prefer things when they're taken from others. And it's associated with the one he calls the swallower in symbiotic families, like the dominant one who dictates the rhythm of the family. And these people would tend to be aggressive or conceited, or seducing other people, or this could come out well and they would be like more assertive and proud and captivating. A hoarding orientation are those who expect to keep. They see the world as something they should own, and even people they see as possessions. And so this is linked to that cold, withdrawing family and with destructive tendencies. People like this will be stubborn, stingy, unimaginative. And there is always a flip side to every coin. They could manifest as steadfast, economical, and practical. So there are positive ways to come into all of these orientations. A marketing orientation, people who expect to sell themselves, package, advertise, a lot of what we see on social media, and remember, these ideas are from way before social media, but we sure do see it today. Opportunistic, childish, tactless, or maybe they're taking advantage of it in good ways, like the influences who have good directions, purposeful, youthful, and social. But whether the person is old or new, the tendency tends to be on sensory experience in this life, fashion, fitness, ever young, being daring. And then there's a productive orientation, someone who doesn't shirk away from responsibility and freedom. And this is emerging from that strong family. And so people who come out of that strong family can love each other without smothering or swallowing them, make sense of the rules, don't just follow blindly, and they prefer freedom to conformity. So Fromm talks quite a bit then about love, because he sees love as the grounding force for all of these ideas. And he actually has a whole book about it. He sees it as a creative expression and as a giving, not a receiving. So love is an art, not an experience, he would say. And love is deliberate and intentional. It's not Cupid-like, where someone sprinkled magic fairy dust on you. It empowers and enables a person. When they feel love and give love, they're a better person and they can do more. It doesn't tie them down and feel like they can't do what they need to do. He sees it as the answer to the problems of human existence, some of those existential crises. And he says that it gives and expands, allowing the love you feel for one person to generalize to many people. We have a poem here, Khalil Gibran from The Prophet. He says, love one another. After this poem, this I actually read at my daughter's wedding. He says, love one another in the highlighted section, but make not a bond of love. Let it rather be a moving sea between the shores of your souls. Fill each other's cup, but drink not from one cup. Give one another of your bread, but eat not from the same loaf. Sing and dance together and be joyous, but let each one of you be alone, even as the strings of a lute are alone, though they quiver with the same music. Give your hearts, but not into each other's keeping, for only the hand of life can contain your hearts. And stand together, yet not too near together, for the pillars of the temple stand apart, and the oak tree and the cypress grow not in each other's shadow. Some quotes from Erich Fromm. If a person loves only one other person and is indifferent to all others, his love is not love, but a symbiotic attachment or an enlarged egotism. He says, immature love says, I love you because I need you. Mature love says, I need you because I love you. And one more quote. In love, the paradox occurs that two beings become one and yet remain two. We have in a traditional American wedding ceremony a ritual called the lighting of the candle. Each individual has a candle representing their flame of life, and they light this one candle together, representing the merging of those lives. And in this wedding ceremony, each individual blows out their own candle. I think Fromm would argue with that decision.